Tonight, I am going to talk about the 19th chapter that is titled A Chance Encounter, and it is in the book In Love with the World by Mingyur Rinpoche. So in this chapter, he has been starting to meditate in this park, and a man comes up to him and begins talking to him. And very quickly, the man starts asking him about how to meditate, that he has tried in other traditions, perhaps the Theravadan tradition, and he feels that he is not successful and he needs help. So I'm going to start out by a quote here on page 158. As long as you do not forget awareness, then you can allow thoughts to come in and out like a swinging door. So what he is trying to convey here with this quote is that meditation is not about what you experience so much as maintaining awareness. And what awareness means very simply is, do you know what's going on in your mind? Do you know what's going on outside of your body? And so forth. In other words, we're not trying to block thoughts or stop thoughts. We're not trying to block sensory input from our five senses. It is very simply just being aware, to know. And with this approach, the content of the thoughts are not a problem as long as you are aware of them being content rather than what we usually do is we totally become one with the content, and there is no difference between us and the content of what is going through our minds. And so if we can just maintain that awareness, it doesn't matter if we're having good thoughts, bad thoughts, neutral thoughts. It really doesn't matter. We just need to be aware that we are having these thoughts and try to avoid judging them. And it's common to make thoughts the enemy, that feeling that they are the problem, that you can't meditate as you're having too many thoughts. And so you can try to deny the thoughts. You can try to destroy the thoughts, or you can try to escape from the thoughts. But all of those are really avoiding the awareness. Again, if you can maintain the awareness without wanting to get away from the thoughts, dwell on the thoughts, or whatever, the thoughts come and go, as he said, like a swinging door. We all know, if we look at our minds, that we have a huge number of thoughts as we go through the day, and that we can't just have one thought. the thoughts just keep on coming and coming and coming. And he mentions that when a person first starts to meditate as a beginner, that you learn how crazy your mind is in terms of how many thoughts are constantly going through your mind and how uncontrolled they are. And he says, quote, "It's a great insight," end quote. So it's important to realize that meditation doesn't stir the mind up. It is this increased awareness that helps us see what has already been there. You're seeing the result of awareness. So seeing how crazy your mind is actually a positive sign. And that points out to one of the mistakes that meditators make, is that they want to have positive experiences and no negative experiences. And so here, what ordinarily would be considered a negative experience, and that is having your mind just constantly, you might say, overflowing with thoughts that keep coming and coming and coming, that it's actually not negative, it's that it's an indication of increased awareness. Another point that he makes is that do not conclude that your mind is significantly different from others. Don't think that you are special. And it can go either way. You can think that you are especially great at meditating or whatever you set your mind to do, or you can think that you are especially terrible. And either way, it's a problem. And then denigrating yourself is a form of laziness. And we want to avoid laziness. What denigrating yourself does and why it's lazy is because you will say things like, well, so-and-so, they can meditate, yada, 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 but I can't, so I'm not going to try. Or you try and then you get a little frustrated and you quit. Oh, I can't do it. I just can't do it. I'm just not that kind of person. And so on. So it's really important to avoid the denigration, because your Buddha nature is as good as a Buddha's, and it's as good as any other human being. And if you're having trouble with the meditation, it is because you have not learned how to do it properly or have not put enough effort in. And so it's always important to, as this man in the park that approached Mingyur Rinpoche, it's good to approach a Lama or a meditation instructor from time to time to help fine-tune your meditation. So we cannot stop our thoughts. Meditation is not an attempt to stop our thoughts. That thoughts are just the play of the mind. And the Tibetan word for play that's used in terms of the play of the mind is similar to the word that means to play music. Or I also think of kids at play, like thinking of kids at recess. that it's just what the mind does. And we don't need to get down on ourselves because our mind is playful. It's workable if we know how to use the techniques properly. And he says to this man that you are learning to meditate the way everybody does, because the man has gone off and practiced the instructions Mingyur Rinpoche gave him, and then came back and explained problems that he was having. And so Mingyur Rinpoche says that you are learning the way everybody does, that, quote, with misconceptions and frustrations and trying again and again, end quote. So this is an important point, that it is a practice, meditation, and it is through actually doing it that we make progress in our meditation practice. It's not something that you just pick up and do it, or that you just read enough books and then you can do it. It takes practice, it takes time. And the idea of practice is that it's not a performance, that we're training. Mingyur Rinpoche says we start confused, we have impure motivation, we want experience rather than training. We lack patience and diligence. And so little by little, we keep at it, keep practicing, keep engaging in diligent effort, patient with ourselves and patience with the practice, so that we don't get mad, give up, and so forth, that we stick to it patiently. Sitting meditation is frequently called, when it is following the breath, it is frequently called taming the mind, because we are learning to let go of the thoughts, to not get upset or emotional about what thoughts arise in our minds. We're developing good habits. It's almost like training or taming a dog. You need to have the dog settle down, and you need to have the dog look at you as the master rather than the other way around. And it is this way with our mind and our awareness. We need to be the one that controls how we respond to whatever thoughts arise in our mind. We don't control the thoughts, but through training and developing good habitual patterns, we learn that we don't have to give in to whatever thought or emotion arises in our mind. It's just more thoughts, and it's not a problem. I like to use the contrast between practice and performance. And in terms of, let's say, a classical pianist, that even a classical pianist that has undergone years and years and years and years of training and study, practice, and so forth, they still practice. And in a way, and this is a guess because I'm not a musician, but I would suspect that even when they're on stage giving a performance, that in a way it's practice too, that they are learning things as they let's say it's a solo as they're playing the piano, that of course they're relying on their habitual patterns that they have developed over the years, but they're also engaging in many of the same things they would do when they practice. And I will have to take back that saying that I'm not a musician. I have learned how to play some of the musical instruments in Tibetan pujas, like cymbals, drum, radung, and so forth. And the radung especially comes to mind because when I was learning, I hit a lot of notes that you would not want to make in the middle of a puja. And eventually, I learned how to, you might say, make the bad notes, but I also learned how to make the good notes. And I also learned that there seemed to be a sweet spot in the instrument. It doesn't have any keys. It doesn't have, the only way you change the note is by your lips and the volume of the air. And you just kind of learn from playing it little by little where that sweet spot is. And I can't explain it. I could not teach another person how to find that sweet spot. You just have to find it yourself. And it's like that with meditation. Is you, through practice, you gradually develop this feeling, or even wisdom, if you like, of when you are practicing in a very good, helpful way, when you're maintaining your awareness, and when you get distracted, you realize that you are distracted and come back. And what we're doing when we can rest in that awareness is we're letting our wisdom come to the surface. We're letting ourselves experience our inherent wisdom. That here is another quote. This is on page 160. Everything that we want is already within us. We need to relax and allow our innate wisdom to come forth. So when we are meditating, we're not trying to gain something that we are lacking, that we're missing. What we are doing is cultivating what we have already. And we are working at developing more beneficial habits. We're developing our qualities of patience and diligence, mindfulness, awareness, and so forth. So then the stranger leaves, and he comes back, and they talk about being passive. The man is a businessman, it sounds like, and of course, as a result of that, he can't be passive. It really, you might say, rubs him the wrong way. thinking about being passive, yet he sees a certain passiveness in Buddhism. So Mingyur Rinpoche talks about the differences between acceptance and passivity. So he says, quote, "True acceptance requires an open mind, one willing to investigate whatever arises." End quote. So this idea of being an open mind and inquisitive, along with the awareness quality. So I found that there were 6 points in this section that he made. The first one is meeting the world with freedom. That means your mind is not already made up, that you're not coming from a particular standpoint. It's this open quality. And so the idea of meeting the world with freedom is that your mind has freedom to meet the world. Meet it where it is rather than where you think it should be. The second point is the fresh mind always shows up, no matter what. The fresh mind does not say, well, I need to take a break. And I've been showing up all day, but I need to take a break here and won't show up now for a while. So no matter what, no matter how unpleasant it is to be present, don't fall back into the past or future. So that is the second point. The third point is trusting in uncertainty. And in order to do this, you have to avoid giving in to fear. Life is uncertain, but we have a certain trust that we'll get through it. And we do have this trust in certain parts of our life. We trust our car to get us where we want to go, when we want to be there. Occasionally it doesn't work, but it's amazing how frequently it does work and we do arrive if we leave on time. Or even something as simple as turning on a light switch. We just go over when we want some light in the room and flip the switch and the lights come on. We trust that that will happen. Occasionally there are blackouts and so forth, but usually it happens. So trust is not a negative thing. The next point is genuine discernment arises from wisdom. So here the trust is directed at our own wisdom, our own ability to understand and to see. And he says that an open mind allows the wisdom to arise. It gives room for the wisdom to arise in. So that's the fourth point. The fifth point is having decisions that are free of unquestioning patterns, habitual patterns, that we just, you might say, fall into the pattern and act. And it's somewhat mindless. So karma and habitual patterns are a huge problem. And this point is reducing the effect of karma and habitual patterns on our actions of body, speech, and mind. The last point here, again, talking about the difference between acceptance and passivity. Creative, comma, staying open to change, comma, risking failure. So that's interesting, the creative word, that sometimes we think of works of art as being creative, a painting, a sculpture, a movie, and so forth. But when it gets right down to it, we can, you might say, create the life that we are going to be living in the future, in the present. The decisions that we make in the present, our actions in the present, are really what determines what will happen in the future to a certain extent. And so this creative factor is really important. And what it means is to stay in the present rather than drift into the past or drift into the future, hoping that this will happen. So he says this is how we take control of the direction that we go in, by being creative, staying open to change, risking failure. Earlier in the book, he talks about a student of his who said that you really can't succeed until you're willing to risk failure. So this is who we become by what we do in the present. This is what our life becomes. And of course, it's the same thing with any spiritual activities. So this has a strong bearing in both mundane activities and spiritual activities. And he kind of sums up this section in this chapter. It's a long chapter, very full of very, very helpful information. He says that the best practice is to accept whatever happens, good, bad, or indifferent, and then work with it. And again, incorporating these 6 points that I just went over. Then he has a discussion with the Asian man about masks and who we think we are. And this idea of that we create these masks, and this is who we present ourselves as to the world, as well as to ourselves. It reminded me a lot of a teaching His Holiness the 17th Karmapa gave on the fabricated self. So to go into this in a little more detail, that as children, we develop a persona or a fabricated self, and who we think we are and how we want others to see us. If you think about it, when you are born, you don't even have a name. You really don't know anything. But gradually, as your parents use a name that they have given you, you associate yourself with that name. That is who you are. And as you develop from an infant to a child to a teenager, we grow into these fabricated selves, these ideas of who we are and how we want others to see us. So Mingyur Rinpoche, he says, we grow into these masks. And this particular man that has been coming to Mingyur Rinpoche and asking him about Buddhism and meditation in particular, expresses that he has a lot of doubt about his own authenticity and who he is. And Mingyur Rinpoche simply says, quote, "You added the mask, you can subtract them," end quote. Meaning that we don't have to be held prisoner to the person that we have created, that it's just a creation. It is empty of inherent existence. And in fact, this is what Mingyur Rinpoche is, his goal of doing this 3-year retreat, or 4-year retreat, solitary retreat in India, is to really understand ultimately who he is. So he tells the Asian man that you will survive removing the mask. And he continues by saying that one reason why you feel this lack of authenticity is that with a mask, you're actually impersonating yourself. And that there is something much more real underneath. That removing the mask will actually result in flourishing. To continue then in this chapter, Mingyur Rinpoche at this point starts, as his awareness is there, he realizes that he has briefly returned to his role as a teacher and that it was a mask. So the man leaves and Mingyur Rinpoche returns to his awareness meditation. And one of the points that is important here is that it is his awareness that allows him to see what's going on in his mind and then to work on it using various techniques that he has learned from his teachers and from his own experience. So kind of following what he was talking about earlier with the difference between acceptance and passivity, that he sees what's going on, he accepts it, and then he works on it. He doesn't condemn it. Well, 2 days have passed now, and he is back in the park And the man returns and requests more teachings and expresses that he is having problems with his practice. And Mingyur Rinpoche, he says that he really wants to get on with his solitary retreat and practice, but he has been requested to teach, and that he has vows to teach and benefit whoever. That it's not a matter of picking and choosing who and when he's going to teach. So he tells the man, the problem that you're having is you're trying to control your thoughts. That's what is keeping you from meditating. And a quote about this is, it's on page 164. The essence of meditation is awareness, joy, clarity, inner peace. These are the byproducts, but they are not the essence of meditation itself. So the more we strive for these experiences, the more we focus on what should be happening. And this blocks the recognition of our awareness. So it's a huge obstacle. So he tries a different meditation technique with the man. He introduces him to thought meditation. And so in this type of meditation, instead of focusing on the breath going out and in, you focus on the thoughts. Just watch the thoughts. Again, having this subtle awareness that there is this watcher watching the thoughts. So he says, whatever happens, watch. Just rest in awareness. Rest this awareness on the thoughts. Don't chase them, don't cling to them. When you're distracted, just come back to watching the thoughts come and go. And he says, also, you can switch to being aware of input from the five senses, the sense of smell, taste, touch, sight, and hearing. That you can focus on any of that coming in from the five senses. But again, not attached to it, just be aware of it. He says, pay attention to bodily discomfort, if you're restless, or if you are agitated, or whatever is going on with your body. So these are different things you can place your awareness on that can help letting go of the thoughts when they arise. He says to be with the clarity of the mind, the clarity of mere knowing. So this means no concepts about what is going on in your mind, no grasping at whatever impulses arise in your mind. And this allows you to connect with your inner wisdom. There is space for that inner wisdom to arise and for your awareness to recognize it. So the man leaves, practices for about an hour, and then he comes back. He says, I can't find my thoughts. It's just a blank mind. And so then Mingyur Rinpoche goes into some more teaching here. As I said, there is a lot in this chapter. So he says that blank mind is actually open awareness. And this is the secret of thought meditation. That there's no object of awareness with this open meditation. We're not focusing on the breath, on a sound, a thought, a feeling. You're just focusing on the awareness. You might say you're aware of being aware. And that's what this man was experiencing. It's actually a sign of being able to do the practice. Quote, awareness is aware of itself. It recognizes the spacious qualities of mind that are always present. This, by the way, is a very advanced practice. This being aware of the awareness without content, where it might seem like it's blank or it's void. But if there is this recognition of being aware, then that's very different. And as he just said, as I quoted, this helps us recognize this spacious quality of mind. You really can't put your finger on this spacious quality, but our mind has this spacious quality where it is, you could say blank, but this is where everything arises. So that blank is actually very, very full of potential. It is full of potential. I was going to say very, very fertile. And I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that, but it's usually not used in terms of Tibetan Buddhism and emptiness, but it's full of potential. Everything arises from emptiness. So if you dismiss that, he later calls it a gap. That blank, that gap, that nothing is unimportant. That's a problem. And that isn't true open awareness. And this practice is not true open awareness, which is actually a Mahamudra practice, but this is going in that direction. He says it's not true open awareness, but it's more spacious than having the thoughts going around, running wild in your mind. It is awareness without too much thought. Again, here is a longer quote. This is on page 165. If you can recognize that the blank has less thinking, then you are connecting to the quality of empty mind. And in that moment, there is clarity and luminosity in the mind that experiences thoughts with awareness. End quote. So to finish up this chapter, with this awareness of the gap, it becomes spacious. It's like watching TV, but remaining a watcher rather than getting sucked into the TV program. And then he says that we all have an inner TV, these thoughts that are going constantly. But the TV is old and it's mostly reruns. And this is actually one of his favorite lines. I've heard him say this many times in public teachings of his that I've attended. So our thoughts and emotions that keep arising in our mind, they're mostly he frequently says soap operas, and that they're reruns of soap operas. This is getting at the idea that there isn't this freedom that was talked about earlier, that this is just more of the same old, same old. So he parts with the man that has asked him so many questions over these last few days. And the man is quite pleased with what Mingyur Rinpoche has taught him. And he reflects that he would like to have been in retreat rather than going back to his teacher role, his teacher mask, but that generosity is about giving when you can, and it's beyond approval, disapproval, liking, disliking, and whatever. And so he more or less had to give. He really didn't have a choice.